Hey everyone, welcome back. Thanks for joining us. Today we've got a brand new story to share with you. So let's begin. For 20 years, John Vance had been living a double life. He was a Marine sniper, a DEA operative, and for the last year and a half, a mid-level arms dealer named Leo Mendez. He'd painstakingly built this new identity, complete with fake tattoos that told fictional stories of prison time and scars from imaginary brawls. His flawless Spanish accent was the result of countless hours of practice, a final touch on the elaborate mask he wore. But beneath the facade was the unblinking patience of a predator, honed by a decade and a half of hunting society's most dangerous criminals. The Ramirez cartel was his obsession, his personal white whale, for the past 3 years. Its leader, Elias Ramirez, was young but exceptionally cruel, having built his empire on the literal remains of his enemies. Intelligence reports claimed Elias collected the bones of rival cartel leaders, displaying them in his private study like a grotesque museum of his conquests. His sadism was legendary even among other narcos. He had once fed a DEA informant to his pet tigers, while the man's family watched the live stream. As Leo Mendez, John had infiltrated the cartel's weapons supply chain, spending months earning trust by orchestrating arms deals between corrupt military contacts and the organization. Every conversation was recorded, every transaction documented with state-of-the-art surveillance equipment that was undetectable even to Elias's notoriously paranoid security sweeps. The operation was just a few weeks from its conclusion, a massive sting that would take down the entire Ramirez network. His marriage to his wife, Sarah, had always been difficult. They had met 12 years earlier when she was a trauma nurse and he was recovering from shrapnel wounds from a tour in Afghanistan. He was captivated by her unique blend of compassion and strength. Their son, Ethan, now 15, was born during a rare quiet period in John's career. But the undercover work had acted like a slow poison on their relationship. The prolonged absences, the constant lies, and the psychological burden of living as a criminal had created a chasm between them. Sarah had grown suspicious, then bitter, and finally cold. She had asked for a separation 2 years ago and filed for divorce 6 months ago. John was too deep in the Ramirez operation to fight for his family, a decision that would soon prove to be a grave mistake. Ethan was John's lifeline to humanity. Their Saturday morning calls were sacred, conducted on burner phones with strict security protocols. Ethan was a smart kid, possessing his father's tactical mind and his mother's emotional intelligence. He understood, even at 15, that his father's job was both dangerous and vital. He never once complained about the missed birthdays or school events. This quiet maturity would ultimately save both their lives. Sarah's new relationship began innocently enough, or so John believed. During one of their conversations about their divorce, she mentioned dating a new man, a businessman named Elias, who was kind and stable. He was, as she put it, actually present in her life. The cruel irony of the situation wasn't lost on John, but he was too focused on the mission to investigate further. He chalked up his wife dating a man named Elias in the same city where he was hunting Elias Ramirez to a bizarre coincidence. The truth, however, was far more deliberate. Elias Ramirez hadn't stumbled into Sarah's life by chance. He had been monitoring John Vance's family for months. His security chief had identified Leo Mendez as a potential threat. Sophisticated facial recognition software, cross-referenced with prison databases and law enforcement records, had flagged discrepancies in Mendez's identity. It wasn't enough to prove he was a federal agent, but it was enough to warrant a deeper look. Elias's courtship of Sarah was a masterpiece of manipulation. He made sure to be at her gym, her coffee shop, and her grocery store, always a nearby presence, but never pushy. When she finally approached him, their first conversation was about his import-export business and her work as a nurse. He played the part of a successful entrepreneur, charming but not overwhelming, interested but not desperate. Within weeks, Sarah was drawn into his orbit. She was unknowingly sharing intimate details about her estranged husband, his scars, his habits, his paranoia about being watched, all of which Elias meticulously documented and analyzed. He was building a psychological profile of Leo Mendez through his wife's conversations, identifying his weaknesses and pressure points. The cartel leader's plan was a masterpiece of brutality. If Leo Mendez was a federal agent, Elias would destroy him by using his family as a weapon. If he was just a rival trafficker getting too close, the same strategy would eliminate the threat. Either way, Elias would ensure maximum suffering before delivering the final blow. Sarah's betrayal ran deeper than just a new relationship. Feeling lonely and angry about her husband's constant absence, she began to share more than just her feelings with Elias. When he expressed concern about suspicious activity in her neighborhood, framing it as worry for her safety, she told him about the strange car she had seen, John's odd phone calls, and his secretive behavior. Elias encouraged these conversations, validating her suspicions and fueling her resentment. Slowly, Sarah became an unwitting informant. She even took photos of John's go-bag during one of his rare visits home, thinking she was gathering evidence of an affair. Instead, She was providing Elias with images of federal-grade communication and tactical gear. She also shared details about John's sleep patterns, his defensive instincts, and his emotional vulnerabilities. In her mind, she was confiding in a supportive partner. In reality, she was giving a cartel assassin everything he needed to destroy her family. The revelation of Leo Mendez's true identity came through a combination of old-school police work and modern tech. A member of Elias's crew had a contact in Border Patrol who ran facial recognition on anyone suspicious. When Mendez's face was run through federal databases, including classified DEA files, the match was unmistakable. It was John Vance, decorated Marine, 15-year DEA veteran, married to Sarah, with a son, Ethan, a sophomore at a high school in the area. The file was extensive, detailing their home address, Sarah's work schedule, Ethan's school routine, and even their favorite restaurants. Elias's initial rage at being deceived quickly turned into something far more chilling. Anticipation. This wasn't just about killing a federal agent. This was about sending a message that would echo through law enforcement for decades. The Ramirez cartel didn't just kill federal agents. They destroyed them, obliterating their families, their legacies, and their very memory. The plan Elias devised was psychologically precise. He would use John's love for his family to be the instrument of his own destruction. John would be forced to watch his son die, then his wife before being killed himself. But not quickly. Elias intended to keep him alive for days, systematically dismantling everything he cared about while extracting information about other undercover operations. While the trap was being set, John remained focused on his mission. He was unaware that his family had become pawns in a game he didn't even know he was playing. His last communication with his DEA handlers had been a routine status report. The operation was proceeding flawlessly, or so it seemed. Ethan was the first to realize something was wrong. Teenagers often possess an intuitive understanding of adult dynamics that surpasses conscious awareness. Elias's increasing presence in their home felt invasive, not welcoming. The man asked too many questions about Ethan's father and seemed to be studying them rather than bonding. When Ethan brought up his concerns with his mother, Sarah dismissed them as jealousy. She was so thankful for Elias's attention that she mistook her son's unease for selfishness. This growing rift between mother and son created the perfect cover for Elias's true intentions. The call came on what was supposed to be John's last day undercover. He was in a warehouse in Tijuana, finalizing a massive arms shipment that would be the climax of the operation. Hidden devices were recording Elias's entire distribution network, mapping connections that would allow federal agents to dismantle the organization completely. John's burner phone vibrated with an incoming call from Ethan's number. Protocol dictated he ignore it, but paternal instinct overrode his training. He stepped away from the other cartel members and answered. "Dad, they know." Ethan's voice was strained with terror and rage. "Mom's new boyfriend is the cartel boss you're investigating. He has us tied up. He said you have to choose who dies first when you walk in. I told him you'd kill him. He just spit in my face." The world shrank to a single terrible point. The scrape of boots on the concrete floor, the distant hum of traffic, the whisper of wind. Every sound in the warehouse became hyper-distinct. John's mind processed the implications with cold efficiency while his heart shattered into a million pieces. Elias knew. He had always known. The entire operation was compromised. His family wasn't just in danger. They were already captured, already being used as weapons against him. "Ethan, listen to me carefully," John whispered, moving deeper into the shadows. "Are you in the house?" "Yeah, the basement. Mom's here too," Ethan said. "Dad, he knows everything about you. He's been planning this." "Mom didn't know. She's crying and saying she's sorry, but Dad." The line went dead. John stared at the silent phone for 3 seconds, his operational mind cataloging resources and options, while his emotional core ignited into something beyond rage. He had spent 18 months building Leo Mendez's reputation as a dangerous but predictable criminal. Now he would show Elias Ramirez what John Vance was truly capable of. He burned his cover without a second thought. As he walked back to the group of cartel members, he shed Leo Mendez like a snake shedding old skin. His posture straightened, his accent vanished, and his eyes became as cold as a winter sky. The cartel members noticed the change immediately. The dangerous arms trafficker they had known was gone, replaced by something far more lethal. "Gentlemen," John announced, his voice filled with absolute authority, "this meeting is over. You're all under arrest." The explosion of violence was swift and decisive. These weren't petty thugs. They were professional killers with years of combat experience. But John had been a Marine sniper before he was a DEA agent, and 18 months of careful observation had shown him every weakness in their operation. His first shot took out the warehouse's electrical system, plunging the space into darkness that favored his training. The night vision he had honed through thousands of hours of tactical operations gave him a decisive advantage. As the cartel members panicked, their gunfire illuminated their positions while revealing nothing about his. John moved through the warehouse like death incarnate, eliminating threats with surgical precision. This wasn't about arrests. It was about sending a message to Elias Ramirez. The hunter had become the hunted, and mercy was no longer an option. 8 minutes later, 7 cartel members lay dead. John's extraction team arrived to find him gone, along with the warehouse's entire communications array and several vehicles. He disappeared into the Mexican underground with resources and intelligence that made him more dangerous than any criminal Elias had ever faced. The race back to San Diego was a blur of speed and violence. John commandeered vehicles, changed identities, and crossed the border using methods that existed outside the law. His go bag, retrieved from a secure location, contained enough firepower to level a city block and communication equipment that would keep him invisible to both law enforcement and criminal surveillance. But as he drove through the night, a terrible realization dawned on him. This wasn't just about Elias discovering his identity. The timeline was wrong. For Elias to have planned this level of infiltration, he would have needed months of preparation, which meant Sarah's involvement wasn't accidental. His wife hadn't simply fallen for Elias. She had been sharing intelligence about her husband's activities. Whether she knew it or not, she had provided the cartel with everything they needed to compromise the operation and target their family. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound. John's phone rang as he approached the California border. It was Elias Ramirez calling from Ethan's number. Agent Vance. Elias's voice was slick with satisfaction. Leo Mendez was so much more interesting than I expected. A decorated Marine turned DEA operative, 18 months deep in my organization. Truly impressive work. Where are they? John's voice held the promise of apocalyptic violence. Safe for now. Your wife is quite beautiful, by the way. We've become very close over the past few months. She's told me so much about you. Your habits, your fears, your weaknesses. Did you know she takes photos of your equipment when you visit? Very thorough documentation. The confirmation of Sarah's betrayal hit him like a physical blow, but John channeled the pain into fuel for what was coming. I'm going to kill you, Elias. Not arrest you. Kill you and everyone you've ever cared about. Elias laughed. Perhaps, but first you're going to watch your family die. Your son has been very brave, very defiant. It will be entertaining to break that spirit while you watch. As for your wife, well, she'll learn the price of pillow talk with cartel leaders. 24 hours, John said quietly. Disappear. Release them, and you get a 24-hour head start before I hunt you down. Refuse, and I'll make you beg for death. Agent Vance, you seem to misunderstand, Elias said. You're not in a position to make demands. In fact, you're going to walk into my house unarmed and alone. Or I'll start by removing pieces of your family, beginning with your son's fingers. The line went dead, leaving John alone with the weight of impossible choices. Elias expected him to surrender, to trade his life for his family's temporary safety. It was the logical move, the one any loving father would make. But John Vance had never been accused of being logical. The house looked exactly as John remembered it, a suburban home concealing domestic destruction. Elias's security was professional but predictable. Perimeter sensors, roving patrols, and sniper positions were all visible to anyone trained in tactical observation. The cartel leader was confident, but not careless, which would make the coming violence more challenging, and far more satisfying. John didn't approach the house immediately. Instead, he spent 6 hours in surveillance, mapping every security measure while his rage crystallized into something harder than diamond. This wasn't about rescue anymore. This was about delivering consequences that would echo through cartel leadership for generations. His plan started with psychological warfare. Using communication equipment from his go bag, John hacked into Elias's security network and began a systematic demolition of the cartel leader's life. Bank accounts in 17 countries vanished into a digital void. Safe houses across 3 continents received simultaneous federal raids, coordinated through John's DEA contacts. Business partners found themselves under investigation by agencies they'd never even heard of. Within hours, Elias Ramirez went from untouchable crime lord to hunted fugitive. But that was just the beginning. John's next move involved Elias's own organization. The cartel leader's paranoia about loyalty was legendary, but that paranoia could be weaponized. Using intercepted communications and his deep knowledge of the cartel's structure, John began feeding information to rival factions, suggesting that Elias was planning to eliminate potential threats. The result was predictable. Elias's most trusted lieutenants began turning against each other, each convinced that the others were planning a betrayal. Cartel discipline collapsed into chaos as different factions moved to protect themselves from imaginary threats. The organization that had taken Elias years to build began to consume itself from within. But psychological and organizational warfare weren't enough. This required a personal touch. John entered the house through a route that wasn't on any blueprint, a drainage system he had mapped during his surveillance. The basement where his family was being held was accessible through a method that bypassed every security measure Elias had put in place. Ethan and Sarah were bound but unharmed, guarded by two sicarios who had grown complacent during their long watch. John's approach was as silent as death itself, honed by years of operations where discovery meant annihilation. The guards died without a sound, without a struggle, without warning. "Dad!" Ethan's whisper was a mix of disbelief and desperate hope. "I'm here, son." John's voice was gentle as he cut his family's restraints, but his eyes remained flat and cold. Sarah couldn't meet his gaze. "John, I'm so sorry. I didn't know who he was. You thought you'd find ammunition for your divorce proceedings," John said, his voice devoid of any warmth or forgiveness. "You photographed my equipment. You shared details about my work, my schedule, my vulnerabilities. Whether you knew who Elias was or not, you betrayed everything we built together." Sarah's tears meant nothing to him now. The woman he had loved was gone, replaced by someone who had chosen comfort over loyalty and excitement over commitment. She had made her choice months ago, and now she would live with the consequences. "Ethan, stay with your mother. Don't leave this room until I come back." "Dad, there are 12 of them upstairs plus Elias. They're expecting you to surrender." "I know." John's smile was terrible to see. "They're expecting Leo Mendez. They're about to meet John Vance at war." The slaughter that followed would be a whispered legend in the criminal underworld for years to come. John moved through Elias's house like a force of nature, eliminating threats with an efficiency that bordered on the supernatural. These weren't arrests or self-defense killings. This was systematic execution delivered with surgical precision. Each death was calculated to increase Elias's psychological pressure. John left the bodies where they fell, creating a trail of carnage that led inexorably toward the cartel leader's position. The message was clear. There would be no escape, no negotiation, no mercy. Elias's legendary composure finally broke when he found his personal bodyguard, a man who had never failed to protect him, hanging from a second-floor balcony with his own intestines. The cartel leader's hands shook as he tried to contact his remaining security, only to discover that John had systematically dismantled his entire protection network. "Mendez!" Elias's voice echoed through the house. "Leo, whatever your real name is, let's finish this." "John Vance," John replied from somewhere in the darkness. "Remember that name when you're screaming." The final confrontation took place in Elias's study, surrounded by the bone trophies that had once symbolized his dominance. The cartel leader stood behind his desk, an automatic weapon aimed at the doorway, sweat streaming down his face despite the air conditioning. John appeared not through the door, but through the window behind Elias, moving with a speed that seemed to defy physics. The cartel leader's weapon went flying, his shoulder dislocated by the force of John's entry. Elias crashed to the floor among his bone collection, his own skeleton now at risk of joining the display. "Please," Elias gasped, his arrogance dissolved into pure terror. "I'll give you anything. Money, territory, information about other cartels. Whatever you want." John knelt beside the broken man, his voice conversational. "What I want is for you to understand something. You thought you were hunting a criminal. You were wrong. You thought you could threaten my family. You were wrong. You thought you knew what fear meant. You were wrong about that too. What happened next would never appear in any official report." The sounds that came from Elias's study suggested a level of suffering that went beyond physical pain, extending into psychological territories that had no name. When silence finally returned, John emerged alone. Ethan and Sarah were waiting in the basement, their faces reflecting the knowledge that the man who had rescued them was no longer entirely human. The violence upstairs had transformed John into something harder and colder than Arctic steel. "It's over," he announced. "Ethan, we're leaving now." "What about Mom?" Ethan looked between his parents, recognizing that their family was broken beyond repair. "Your mother made her choices. She chose Elias over us, comfort over loyalty, and betrayal over marriage. She will live with those consequences." John's voice held no emotion. "The divorce papers will be filed tomorrow. Custody will be sole and non-negotiable." Sarah's tears fell unheard as father and son walked away from the wreckage of their family. She had traded everything that mattered for the illusion of security with a monster, and now she faced a future defined by that choice. In the weeks that followed, the Ramirez cartel collapsed completely. Rival organizations carved up the territory like scavengers while federal agencies mopped up the remnants of Elias's network. The official report credited intercartel warfare and coordinated law enforcement pressure for the organization's destruction. Only a few people knew the truth, that a single federal agent had systematically annihilated one of the most powerful criminal organizations in North America using nothing but his tactical expertise, psychological warfare, and a father's love transformed into implacable vengeance. John Vance requested a transfer to domestic operations, citing family considerations. His superiors granted the request without question. His success with the Ramirez operation had earned him any assignment he desired. Ethan adapted to their new life with a resilience that reminded John daily why the boy was worth any sacrifice. Sarah disappeared into witness protection after receiving threats from surviving cartel members who blamed her cooperation for their organization's collapse. Her new identity came with federal marshals and a life of constant vigilance, but no family to share it with. She had chosen excitement over loyalty, and excitement was all she had left. On quiet evenings, when Ethan was studying and the house felt almost normal again, John sometimes reflected on the cost of his choices. He had destroyed a criminal empire, eliminated dozens of threats to public safety, and protected his son from unimaginable danger. But he had also crossed lines that could never be uncrossed, becoming something that existed outside the law he had sworn to uphold. The price of betrayal, he learned, was paid by everyone involved. Elias Ramirez had paid with his life. Sarah had paid with her family and freedom. And John Vance had paid with pieces of his soul that could never be recovered. But Ethan was safe. The cartel was destroyed. And justice, however harsh and personal it might be, had been served. In the end, that was enough. It had to be. John Vance had learned something that Elias Ramirez never understood. There are some lines that, once crossed, can never be forgiven. And there are some people who, once betrayed, will never stop hunting those responsible. The hunter had become the hunted, and the hunted had become the hunter, and in the end, only the strongest survived. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories like this. See you next time.